Another great episode. We had so much fun today. We talked about Texas' big series win over Oklahoma, including the amazing performance of their pitching staff. And of course, our dear Katie Stewart coming up with the game-winning RBIs in 2 of the games, someone we've known for a really long time. So I was super happy to celebrate in her success, and we chat through that. We also talk about relevant in that series, but also has been, high touch point throughout the year is the leadoff review rule. Our thoughts on that, like it, dislike it, its impact on the game so far this season. And finally, we took a question from our dear friend Kris Herman from Williams College about D3 and sort of the limitations that we have with our athletes and how we can maximize our time with them. Super relevant, of course, for any D3 listeners, but also really for everyone and what it takes to kind of maximize your resources. So hope you enjoy. All right, we are back for another episode of the OGX Podcast. I am Krista.
Ashley.
Laura.
And we are back for another one. I think, overall, we felt pretty good about episode 1. And also, it's kind of fun getting together every week and just being able to talk about softball. So excited about this week. I think
we do that anyway. So we just hit record.
Yeah.
This is exactly.
Yeah. Behind the scenes of what we all talk about. Okay, so I thought we would start, and funny, I think the last episode I ended with maybe we'll talk about the Texas-Oklahoma series, and we're going to talk about it. Obviously, Texas took the series. I should have looked up the exact time frame. It was the first time Oklahoma lost a Big 12 series in a very long time. The first time Texas beat them in a series in a very long time. So obviously it's a big deal from that standpoint. From our standpoint, a little close to home because Katie Stewart has trained with us. I was picturing her as like 8-year-old, 9-year-old. And I was trying to remember if it was, and she's going to kill me when she listens to this, like Hello Kitty or Lisa Frank, but that's what she like dressed in. So like Katie walking around our facility, little 8-year-old with her like braids, like little ponytail braids in like neon pink and neon green and like very bright colors, all the way up until sort of being a little bit of the star this weekend, which is fun and deserved to see. And so I think we had some fun in that. So maybe first, obviously Texas held Oklahoma to very few runs, which is, I think, could arguably be the most surprising part of the weekend because Oklahoma just scores so easy. I know for me, when I was watching the games and Texas is only up by like 1 run going into the 7th, I'm like, this is what they do. So the fact that they were able to kind of close the door on that, I think was great. So maybe first just kind of like talk about Texas's use of their whole pitching staff and what we sort of like noticed in that. So open floor. I'll let someone else talk about this part.
Laura, I'm going to let you start because obviously.
I was going to say I was going to let you start. All right.
Go ahead. I was going to say, because I took some heat for like taking up too much time last week.
I think
so
in our like third topic today is going to be Laura heavy. So
okay,
go ahead with the pitching conversation.
I'll give my just kind of like, first impressions. And obviously I know Ashley will have additional things to add, but something that I have been paying attention to a lot with Texas's pitching staff this year is just one, I think, how much they complement each other. To have someone like a Mac Morgan, to have someone like Kavan who just like, they throw hard, they throw in multiple parts of the zone. Like I was like you, Krista, I'm like, oh man, they're only up by 1. Like here comes Oklahoma, right? There is no lead that is ever safe when Oklahoma is up to bat. And, I've really admired the way that Texas has utilized and leveraged all their pitchers so far this season. And I think that's a huge testament to how they were able to hold Oklahoma to, one, a win, but also a slim lead like that and maintain it. And it's so difficult, I think, with the progression of hitters and how good hitters are now, that your pitching staff can be consistent game 1 to game 2 to game 3. I think that's something Texas has done really, really well this season, is a balanced use of their staff. And it felt like you could put any one of them in and they would have success. And I think it's kind of a rare thing right now that you've got an entire staff that can contribute in some way. And I really, it's admirable the way that staff has really, I think, formed over the last, month or so of the season.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to chime in. I just never, honestly, I didn't feel like that by the time Oklahoma, like I wasn't thinking like, oh, they're only down, they're only up 1. I was like, they've got this. I felt good about it because they never looked on time to me. Those Oklahoma hitters never looked on time. I thought that Texas did a really good job. There was just constant change of speeds. I felt like their pitchers, nothing snowballed. So when a couple pitches got away from them, they were able to bring it right back into the command they wanted from it. You weren't, to me, you're not seeing pitchers who are like throwing a ton of different tools at them. So I just think they commanded both sides of the plate really well. It looked very like strategic and as if like, here's the plan. And obviously every coach goes into that weekend explaining to their pitchers, here's the plan. Here's how we're going to keep them off balance. Here's the pitch we're going to rely on. This is what we're going to throw to this half of the plate. Here's what we're going to, but plans go to shit all the time. I mean, I think in reality, it's like the game does not allow you to just like stay on track, especially in moments like that. And they did. I just felt like it looked as if the plan was obviously very thoughtful. And the pitchers, they came through. And I just feel like they stayed on course. It never looked like to me that they were trying to push more than who they were or go outside of what they do. But I never thought that Oklahoma like ever looked zeroed in. You see Oklahoma basically every other weekend when they're just zone. It almost just looks like it doesn't matter what you throw them. They're on time with everything. And they weren't. So I just felt like they really went after this sort of like, how do we keep them from unleashing power on the ball? How do we keep a lot of off speeds in the mix? It was great. I thought it was great. I don't know.
Shout out to their defense, obviously, for being able to.
Major plays, big time plays.
Yeah, you're like, we never really worried, except they almost tied it with that play at the plate and the throw from another freshman, actually. She's also.
Yeah, it's like to win ball games like that, the pitchers have to execute the plan. It's not, I wouldn't say like they threw the games of their lives. It wasn't one of like those, neither of those performances were like that, where it was like unbelievable. They just looked like they executed whatever that game plan really was. And then they needed big time plays. You need a couple of the like, softball god, softball universe to go your way, which it did. And then, and you need big time plays and big time moments. And they did. I just thought it was great. I don't know, like, this is not an anti-Oklahoma. Like what they've built is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's almost like unfathomable. But also, I can't root for that. I mean, like it is at this stage, they are so good that like it is. Unless you're an Oklahoma fan, who is rooting for that? Like I would hardly call Texas an underdog. So if we put Katie aside for a second, because we're obviously about to like really talk about Katie because we love her and she did amazing. But put Katie aside, like. In that scenario, Texas is the underdog. I was just thinking about how the last time they saw each other in the national championship in that final game and Oklahoma just beat the hell out of them, right? And I just thought that like they're the underdog in this, in this scenario, and like who's not rooting for the freaking underdog, So it's just like you love moments like that. So I thought it was just like I thought it was exciting for our game. Teams like Oklahoma have to get knocked off the top because in all sports they have to get knocked off. I thought is just like, I think it'll be interesting to see what goes on with Oklahoma from here on out, because like there's some, they said like, we're not panicked, we're not going to freak out, but they have very little experience in this, like what's happening to us. They have multiple losses. So I think like, of course, they're going to win a lot of ball games from here on out, but I kept thinking, you guys know I'm going to like reference something Rocky Balboa related, but like, when Rocky hits Ivan Drago in Rocky IV and he's like, you cut him. You see, he's a man.
None of us know what you're talking about. Rocky, yes,
I do.
Rocky. Okay, I was like, oh yeah,
he's
Rocky
a man.
4.
He's not a machine. Like you see, he's human. And so like I was thinking of that. Like the world, the opponents that are going across from Oklahoma needed to see. Like you see, they are real people. They are real athletes. They have flaws. They don't always come through in big moments. Like they're not a machine. They're a man, I just kept thinking about that. And it's like, that is so important for, I think, everyone else. I think it's a game changer from here to the rest of the season, like showing the rest of the country that like, this is not invincible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Katie. So obviously we've trained Katie forever. She's just, I always say the thing I love most about Katie is that she's this combination of obviously genetically gifted, tons of innate power, great build, like all the things that you don't just, you can't work your way into a lot of times. So she's got a lot of that, but also has trained the right way for her whole career. So we said like she's, worked with us since she was like 8, and she trained hard all the time. She came back over winter break, trained, she works really hard to capitalize on her skill sets. I think even more powerful, and I actually don't know in the dynamics, but she didn't start Friday. She only pinch hit on Friday. And so I think there was this moment of like, she didn't play in the first game, and she came and stepped up in as a freshman against Oklahoma, and like a huge moment was the game-winning hit in both games. Actually should have possibly, which we'll get into, had 4 RBIs in game 2, but just had really stepped up. And obviously we know she's very talented. I saw her in many forms hit those home runs at the youth level, but to come on that stage is really special. Yeah. And I think like, someone like that has it in them, and it's so fun to like see it happen for them. So it was just like incredible to watch her come up in those big moments. And I coached her a long time. I she definitely shows emotion, but I wouldn't say she's like this massive emotion person. There's like a picture of her coming around the bases, like screaming. And I just like felt so happy for her that she got those opportunities, and pretty incredible against Maxwell, against these kids, to come in there and just smash the ball. Really awesome and exciting for her.
I really wanted to hug her. Can't hug her from through the TV.
I think it's such a testament just to like her, you said she didn't start the first game of the series, and, she's been kind of hopping around in the lineup between behind the plate, playing first, playing third, as a DP. And like, that's a lot as a freshman, even as talented as Katie is, that's a lot as a freshman to be searching for your role in the lineup, and to trust that, if a coach says, hey, not this game, to mentally be able to say, all right, well, then the next one I'm in, I'm going to make an impact. And for her to do that twice in a row in a series like Oklahoma, I mean, it's, we already know Katie is, she's very special. She's very gifted. She's just, athletically a freak sometimes, but to come back, mentally from that, to find her role, to be able just to step in whenever is, it's just such a testament to her mental game and the ability to do that.
I think they were talking about in the second game, they like kept showing the windows because in batting practice she broke 2 of those windows, and I thought like, this building is not good for them and Katie. Katie's hit that building like multiple times already.
And while I'm sure Texas can afford to replace those windows, is it a dorm or something?
I was like, why? Yeah, it's like the graduate student building or something. Like, who thought that regular windows were a good idea there?
I kept joking about the Stewie window fund, right? We need a fund made to basically replace those windows every time she breaks one.
My sons obviously know Katie and grew up watching her in high school, and so they love watching games when her or her sister or anyone that they've sort of seen are playing. And another game, not in this Oklahoma series, she hit a home run like it hit the building too, and that was like my phone blew up when she hit that last one because people were like, did you see that home run? It was like almost 300 feet. It's like hit that building. My kids were watching it or watched the replay, and they were like, oh my gosh, she almost hit it in the road. Like they couldn't believe watching it, which is obviously cool to have. Also just testament to our game being on TV and the thing that my like young sons can watch and sort of like idolize these.
We've always,
incredible.
It's kind of like, recapping what you just said, Krista, we've always known Katie is special because she's so skilled. Yeah. She's elite, always has been. But she, as you said, like she works. I mean, she'll come in here. You will sit down with her. You will expose where she's not strong. She will train it. She will fail. She'll be pissed while she's failing, but she'll be failing at it, and she'll be digging for it, and she'll let the numbers tell her if it's getting there. I mean, she just puts her head down and works. She's throwing front toss to kids that are next to her that are just trying to like maybe make their high school team, maybe just hope to have an opportunity in college. She's humble in here. She doesn't feel like she's above anything. We've always known that dynamic about her is really special. And I think the third category of like, who knows until she gets there is like, will she handle that that pressure, that spotlight, that stage. You know, of course, we have all the confidence in the world in her. So we're like, yeah, she's going to do it. She's going to do it. So it's not like we're surprised. But now that it's like known, that's a yes. To me, it's like she's an absolute rock star because of all three of those categories. The way she trains, the way she pushes herself, how vulnerable she is into like exposing, you know, how to get things that are not her strengths better. Combined with her elite talent and her elite skills, combined with the fact that she's a freshman handling a big time stage. So I can't wait till she comes back to hug her. So she's I'm glad she's a hugger. You know, I'm always like, I'm coming in.
A shout out to her older sister as I walked in the house last night and I was watching Bradley and NIU just smoke a grand slam. I mean, it was flawless. So like
sisters.
hitting prowess.
And their older sister who also smoked home runs.
Right. It's just like it runs deep and they're fun to watch. So, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, you know, literally the grand salami that I watched go over the fence when I got home last night from DD. So the Stewart sisters are thriving in the college game. Thriving.
Yeah. They deserve it.
Yeah.
Okay. On that note, the leadoff review rule. I definitely didn't anticipate how it was going to be used, so we'll talk about that. But in the very first game I watched, so Riker was down at Georgia Tech, and watching their games, and I watched their game on TV, and someone stole, and they reviewed it, and they called her out, and I texted Riker, "Oh my! I didn't know you could review leadoffs this year. This is going to dramatically change our game." And what I was thinking about is just like the steal rate is going to go way down because it's so hard to time that correctly. And so this idea that we're going to just challenge when people, and I was really just thinking about it in like when the play was involved, like this is going to change our game because it's, you know, you think about in high school, how much you work on like the timing of that. And also probably say in high school sometimes, like if the ump's over at short, like, you know, push it a little bit of what the timing. Yeah. And so that's what I was thinking of. And then I watched, I think the first time it got used in the way was the Stanford game. It was Stanford, Texas, wasn't it? I don't know. When Stanford used it because it was a game Stanford won. So I can't remember who they were playing, but is a 7th inning or 6th inning or something. And it was no play. No ball got put in play, no nothing. And they came out to review and I was like, holy shit, I know what they're reviewing. Mm-hmm. And the announcers were talking about, they had, an assistant coach or something, just waiting for the moment that someone left early in a moment that they wanted to call. And Jess Allister was kind of like smirking, like, and I thought like, this is smart as hell. She just like waited for this. So I think she was the first one I saw use it in the way that it's being used now. I obviously will let you guys talk about it. What I will say, I don't love it in plays that there's nothing happening. Definitely like the Stanford version I gave, that seemed insane. There was no ball in play. It's kind of like when slappers hit a foul ball and they call them out and you're like, what? Like, you know, sometimes it's just like, there's no play here. So I don't love it in those instances. I will asterisk it. And it breaks my heart because it was Katie's hit. I don't know why that player left so early on that. You know, this is a rule that's getting called, and she really left early in that instance. It was so obvious to the review. This is something that like the ump could have called with their eye. It was so early. And so I think there's an element too of like, they really shouldn't be able, what if there was a play at the plate and that like, you know, there are instances where it's, yeah, I don't know. And that one, I was like, that was a bummer. I hate that they used it like that. And also, why were you 4 steps off the bag? When you know this,
front of her too.
And when you know this rule's getting called like this, like, you know, they're going to wait for this opportunity to call this rule. So that was kind of a bummer, I think, from that standpoint. But I like it for steals, to be honest. I think like steals and plays, like, it sucks how precise it can be. And I think there's an element of you'll probably end up leaving late in most cases. And so it does change our game. It changes the dynamic of our game. And I guess that's up for discussion if we like that or not. But I do think people leave early all the time. I think that steals were probably inflated because of that. It was really hard to throw people out. So I think for instances like that, it makes a lot of sense. For instances like they just took a lead off and nothing happened, it's kind of a bummer. And it's hard. I would say I had friends who played softball in college with me, but who are not obviously as ingrained in the game as I am now. And we were watching that game and they were confused. So it starts to pull away, I think, from our game. If I'm a more casual viewer of like, what the hell is going on here? Like, why are we taking everything back? Nothing even happened. And so that's what I don't love about it. It's like slowing the game down. It's harder to watch as a not like true fan. So I think that there's definitely some tweaking of it. That's what I would say.
I think the real irony of the rule, I can't stand it. So let me just be clear about that. And I think the irony of it is that you're allowed to go back to a replay, like on a slow it down, high speed camera, use technology, because we assume like, well, the umpire obviously may not have gotten it right because he or she was just using their eyeball. So then you're able to test that the athlete who only gets to use their eyeball. So like that it's like you're pinning technology against the like weakness of like, of course, we can't make that decision in real time and get it right, which is why the umpires are allowed to use the cameras to get it right. But the only way the athletes can get it right is just by using their eye, reacting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting part of our game.
Doesn't make any sense.
It's a really interesting part of our game that we have to time up.
Yes,
something
totally.
So complicated because you're timing up release, and so I think that's kind of where my gut is that you shouldn't be able to leave early because our bases are so close. It does give you an advantage. If we don't want that advantage, we should have some rule. Know that that's probably going to skew everyone then to leaving late. And so is that what we want? Like, I think it starts a conversation of like, what are we going for?
There should probably be a window of time that you're allowed to leave instead of there's an instant and your brain has to judge that instant. It's literally not humanly possible. So the fact that we're now going back to a camera to determine that instant, it's like, that's not even... To me, I'm sure a lot of thought went into this, so this will probably piss some people off, but I'm sure a lot of thought went into the rule. To me, it's totally thoughtless. It is totally thoughtless in the like, that is a very unique element of our game that doesn't exist in baseball. It's so unique. It's obviously impossible to actually get it right. Like, I'd love to see what's the percentage of time. Like, is that even like realistic for the brain, the eyes? Like, let me go some like science geek stuff here. Like, is it even real for the brain to judge that and do that? Like, no, that's impossible. So the fact that we can now go and use a camera to determine like it is. So yes, there's an element of it being used in plays that are like, it has no business. So maybe they'll just shift the rules to reflect that. But in my mind, the real issue, as long as you can ever, use a camera to determine if someone's on time and there's an instant in which they're allowed off, that's ridiculous to me. So I think it's thoughtless. I think it was not really considering how unique that is, and then to our game, and then also just like the pure scientific element of like, that's an impossibility. So I'm not a fan. Nope, not rooting for that one.
It's funny. I didn't think about that. Your take of like, you're relying on the human eye, but the umpires are allowed to go back. I didn't even consider that. The first time I saw it used and was like, it was Texas A&M. And I maybe it was Jeff Harger. I'm not sure who called for the review, but it ended up taking a run off the board. I think they were up 1-0 on someone. Can't remember who they were playing. And I believe like hit and run, and they challenged the runner at second leaving early because that runner at second ended up coming around to score. And I was like, ooh, this is some strategery. Okay, I kind of like this. And then I just saw a statistic. I think it was from
17%, right?
16 or 17% from Joanna Lane, right, today?
Yeah, that's how many of all the reviews. That's the percentage that are for leaving early.
We're creeping down like 20% of the time we're spending on reviews.
That's smart as hell. You can't
Laura,
fault the coaches because they are smart.
In a world, no, it's not against coaches. Right. It's the rule. In a world where we now know like the individuality of the brain as well. Like when we were growing up, people were like, "Don't leave when you see release," because by the time basically the eye tells the brain, tells the body, you actually get
and depending on what lead you do.
Totally.
Like,
so
rocker steps.
We were always taught like when they get to this point, but
right.
That's when you should then tell yourself to go.
But we have people with short arm paths and long arm paths.
The variability in pitchers, the variability in processing time for athletes. You cannot have a blanket on this pitcher leave when she's here. It is I am like, it's an impossibility. It pisses me off like her. Like I am literally like.
Can you review the slapper rule?
I'm not totally sure what I don't know what the parameters are because my complaint
I don't think that you
about
can review the slapper rule, which is very interesting. Like if you can't, like that's an interesting one because it's not similar but somewhat similar and sort of like its application. If you could every time a slapper batted, no matter like if they just take a ball, go review it. Like that would be interesting too because there's like
it has to be like on the play. If there was a play, you could do it.
If there was a play, you could.
I assume that's what they're gonna do. I assume what they're gonna do is put some
if there was a play
limitations around if there was a play. But I still think the rule in general is just like it doesn't work. It's just like it doesn't work for our game. For the reasons I just said.
We add the pitch clock in order to speed up the game, right? We add the pitch clock to keep things moving. Batter's got to be in by 12 seconds. And then we're spending all this freaking time on these reviews that it's like these games are, when they're competitive, like Texas, Oklahoma, they're going to go, and be competitive and they're going to have reviews. Right. It's like we put this.
Well, we're doing it on like trickery reviews because we're like using the difference between like, was she safe or was she out? As different from like, did this random kid leave early so that I can like let's
go back to a shout out to Katie because she kept such poise. I can't wait to ask her though, like, what the hell were you thinking when that happened? She must have been
I texted her about it a little bit and I was like, I just thought like that sucks because like you don't get 2 hits in one at bat off Oklahoma, so it's like it's just like, popped up. It was like, oh god.
I think what was frustrating was that runner on second had nowhere to go too. She had nowhere to go. It wasn't a steal. It was just a leadoff.
You don't.
It's frustrating.
You don't grow up in the game thinking that much about that, So I think you just fall into kind of like, you just do
take your lead off
because at no time in the game with an umpire, the only time they call people out for leaving early is when they're stealing, like at the youth level, and so. They don't just like watch you like a hawk in plays where you're not stealing. And so these women have grown up their whole career not overly thinking about the timing of that. So I get it. I don't know. I think maybe I'm a little more on the like, I don't hate it completely because I just think there's more conversation. Did we feel like steals were out of control? Like, did we feel like we were giving runners an advantage that like the catchers could never overcome because the umpires were just missing this too often? Like if we felt that, then I think that there's maybe a place for it. And I could see an argument that it was a lot. It was just like, how could you ever throw some of these kids out? Especially if they get 2 steps and our bases are so close and the timing is so short. So I could see that. I think that's what the nuances that we probably need to go into the rules meetings talking about is like, what exactly were we trying to curb? I think people are having the same conversation still about slapping because that rule changed our game. It made being a slapper very hard. And so I think that people have that same question was like, was that our intention here was to get rid of that? And so I think just like getting a little more at the root of like, what was our intention here and going for that and deciding that. So I think there's a place where I would support it for especially steals, things like that, where they, are able to kind of take extra things because of that. But definitely needs to have some parameters on it.
Gosh, your point about the short arm paths is sticking in my head. I'm like, great, at 10U, I'm making that at 10U, and we all learn how to steal, right? I don't know when stealing comes into play. We'll call it 10U. Everyone's lat length is nice and long because no one's been ruined by pitching yet. And then now we get into the college game and everyone's arms are short.
I guess when you racing all these different.
No, I'm just obsessed with the like what Krista said. We're missing, the umpires are missing too many calls because they're using the human eye. Like,
well,
that is the
you can't go there. You can't go there for everything. Because I would argue that's why we do the review, though, because there's some plays that are too big.
I know, but it's because it's this. Except that it's very specific to leadoff because we're like it has to be at the instant. That's bizarre. That's like what is another example where you have to determine timing off of a single instant in any game like that? Like that's what I think is so unique about it. It's just to me. Yes, I agree. That's why we ever do reviews, but we put that same element on the athlete to get that right. I just don't get it.
It's the reason MLB hasn't adopted robot strike zones yet, because a big reason is that the fans won't get it. That's a lot of feedback you hear, because if a pitch catches the catcher off guard, if it looks off, and the umpire and the robot umpire calls it a strike zone because technically, or a strike because technically it was a strike, that you'll lose the fan interaction. And I think that's a little bit of what I'm saying here is like, there's an element of like you're losing fan engagement because nobody wanted to see, everyone wanted Katie's hit to stand. No one, I mean, Oklahoma fans didn't. And I get why coaches are using it, but no one wanted to, like, that is hard as a fan to really be like, oh yeah, I get it. This random second base kid stepped off 2 feet early. So now we lost all the fun of the game. Like it's a hard thing. And so I think you have to think a little bit about how the fans are going to interact with that. And it's just way too hard to explain. I think like I said, if there's a play involved, I think fans would get that a lot more of like, she got an advantage. She got a 2-step advantage. Right. And then because of that, the outcome changed.
Hit and run, scoring plays, like those are, I think those are
right. Well, I guess it's kind of like obstruction, like not obstruction at the plate, but like obstruction of the runners. That you determine that more on like, was there a play? Was there a play here? Did the play change? And so I think you could say like you could review whatever you want, and then the umpires would be reviewing both. Did she leave early and did it impact the play? And if it didn't, then they don't go back. And I think there's probably some version of that. But yeah, it's a little painful, but we'll write it out for the year. I'm sure that we'll have some good fun with it in the World Series.
It's painful, but also can you imagine if Texas lost because of it? We'd be just losing it here. We're like, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out, but because Katie's other RBI still, won the ball game for them. But that'd be brutal.
All right. We talked a lot. So I'm jumping to the question here. Our question today is from our friend Kris Herman at Williams College. Great human. I always laugh because I always say when we go to like NFCA or things like that, it's always Kris is always like holding her court. I think at one point at NFCA this year, we were sitting around with a group of coaches and she was in like a high chair. She was the only one that had like a high back chair and everyone was around her. She was like telling stories and great person. Does
that tracks.
Yes, does some work with us, always looking to get better, always trying to like make the game better. And so we love her dearly. So I'm going to play her question here. Give me a second.
Hi, this is Kris Herman from Williams College. I'd like to hear you guys talk about the Division III model, which has generally allows for less practice time than Division I. How can players and coaches create a system that allows kids to be properly conditioned and trained and still be prepared to play 40 games in the relatively short spring season? Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Very diplomatic, Kris.
Yes. We obviously are biased towards this question. I mean, Ashley are because we played Division III. So we work with a lot of a decent amount of D3 colleges too. And this is obviously a challenge. I think Williams is also in the conference that does nothing in the fall, right?
This year they were allowed to.
They were allowed to.
Limited. Yeah, limited, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
traditionally, yes.
Yeah. And I think another thing that changed, they're allowed to do more though in their spring season this year. I can't remember exactly what the rule changed, but they were allowed to, or maybe it was their D3 overall was actually allowed to do a little bit more this year. So I'm going to quote the rule terribly. Probably should have looked it up, but they were allowed to do a little bit more. But they play the same schedule, as everyone, but have a lot less time with them. Can't really oversee them in the off season in the same way. Like have some limitations for that. And so obviously, I think the question is great. I think this conversation of like, how do I appropriately ramp up my players? What does that look like? How do we, train in a way that makes a lot of sense from that standpoint? So I guess, Ash, I'm gonna kick it to you first because you obviously work with Kris a little bit, but I think also we have athletes that we train who go to D3 colleges and do some work with us, and maybe our some examples of how we've gotten helped these athletes get prepared, I guess.
Yeah, I love Division III softball, and this is relevant. This isn't just like a personal, like broadcast here, but I do love Division III softball because we played 100 years ago, but I always felt like there was something so special about the choice that you and all of your teammates were making. There is something that it feels a lot easier to not play anymore. Like the decision that it's too much, it's too hard is always closer to you than if you're getting paid a lot of money. And it is a choice every single day for very little reward. You are not very little reward. It's a huge reward, but very little external reward. You are not posting, I sign with the University of such and such, and everyone is like, it's not this big deal, like you're going to Power 5 school. There's less of that on the outside. You're not on Twitter with big time highlights. You're not on, ESPN. You got no shot at top 10 play. And so the game, to me, for the athletes that choose Division III, there's a purity in their decision. It's about their relationship with the game. It's about the choice they make for themselves. I don't know. I'm obsessed with it. I love it. I'm always so thankful that
like the best employees in the world. They like high academic schools who chose and stuck out a sport.
100%.
D3. I mean,
yes. And it's like, it's not, there's nothing about the frills. There's no, like, they're not on TV. Their national championship, maybe, I think, at the end of the year gets played now, but like, there's nothing. And like,
does some now. So that's
okay,
like
good.
Leadoff Classic and things like that. Sometimes you can, different tournaments.
And I'm not advocating that they shouldn't be getting more, because you ever watch like good D3 softball? I mean, like they're going after a good chunk of Division I schools, but so that's besides the point. But I guess of the gist of like, I don't know, there's, to me, when you choose that route, like I just give you so much credit because I'm like, you love the game, and you have to love it. And I really appreciate athletes who decide to do that. And so that's how I feel about Division III softball, first and foremost. And I think it's related to how I'm going to respond to this. So those athletes, they make that choice. And so with that comes this choice of like, you don't get as much resources. Some places you may, but most places you don't. You're not going to be given the same amount of time. You maybe don't get assigned a nutritionist or have all of the food you may want in your locker room. There are things you just don't get. And so you have to make the decision, to me as an athlete, that like, I chose this and I still want to compete to be the best, even though I won't get as much. So I'm going to have to pour a little bit more into it. And so something that I really loved about our relationship with Williams, we work really closely with them. Obviously, I work directly with Kris. We work with a lot of their athletes. They all sort of like started as S2 OGX athletes, obviously before going into Williams, and then still train with us throughout different points of the year. And so it's really bred this culture of like, if you want to be the best here, this is a place where you want to be the best, right? It's a place like Williams. It's incredibly high academic and the standards are high across the board. And they want to win national championship. So, if you want that, then you've got to treat your journey like it is a Division I journey, because the standards are the same, but the resources aren't. So you have to go out and get them. And I think that's really the message. And I think that what I love about the program is those athletes do that. They do that. They are like totally invested in their player development. They are like fully looking at their dashboards, collecting their data. The work that we do with the Williams pitchers, for example, is not that much different than the work that we are doing with our Power 5 programs. I mean, I think that's the reality of it. And it's those athletes that are really pouring themselves. Now, is Kris doing an amazing job, obviously, in the in-between, making sure that they're collecting the data they need. They're watching the things. She does her homework. She, is as successful as she's been in the game. Her ability to just stay vulnerable. Like, I have to keep learning. I want to know more about pitching. I want to be able to teach pitching. I want to be able to hold them accountable. Just that's remarkable, I think, for someone who's accomplished so much in her career. One of many reasons why I really love her. But those athletes are pouring themselves into that process as well. Mm-hmm. So my feedback, this is a pitching side, so Krista, feel free to come in if it's a little bit, you want to say something more about like a full team base, but my thoughts are that like, it's a culture thing. If that's your culture, is to be great, then absolutely a lot of that has to come back on the athletes and what they can do either on their own or in these like captain's practices, and it can be done. I think it was Atlanta. I don't remember what year it was. Maybe 2016. I think that's right. NFCA 2016 was in Atlanta. And maybe was it Tufts was it Lauren at Tufts? I don't remember, but whoever won the national championship in D3 the year before,
Tufts.
and I think it was
have the
Tufts.
fall. Yeah,
They didn't have the fall.
And everyone was like, what the hell?
And I think, right. And most people were like, this seems ridiculous. But I think the way I was listening to that, as you said, Krista, you and I both played Division III. Like when I was at Emory, I mean, that level of softball was very high when you got into, we didn't have supers, but like, regionals, we both played in the World Series. Like it's very, very elite level softball. And I think kind of found it remarkable that she could get her athletes to that point to be able to play at that level with a limited time. It's obviously a culture thing. They didn't just show up on February X and start practicing. They've been working, but it's been established of like how to work, what to do. So that's my feedback. That's how I think we really handled it at Williams. And yeah, I think it's great. And this is not let's talk about the decision to make D3 versus D2 versus D1. But I do think that just really pouring into the element of there's a culture that just lives alone to me in the D3 world that I think should be really celebrated.
Yeah. I was just, as you were talking, I think we obviously work with Williams. We did assessments at some other D3s and we do a variety of work at D3 level, but we also have athletes come and train with us. I think there is a combination to be successful when you have less resources, less time with them. It's a combination of a coach who's willing to say, I can't help you with this. This is beyond my scope of knowledge, and I don't have the time and resources also to get this knowledge. I can't get more people on staff. I have limited ability to have bigger staff members. Or it's beyond my ability of time that I can spend with you to do this. And so a lot of the athletes that we work with at the Division III level have come to us because they were injured. They just were performing under the potential that the coach thought they had. And their coach said, I think that you should go to OGX and get some help and support. And as they then have gone back to those college programs, while continuing to still pay and train with us, their college coaches have been open to them doing their own program, to them doing their own strength and conditioning, to sort of respecting this individual work and building that culture. Mm-hmm. That combination of an athlete who's willing to do that, and a family who's willing to support that, and a coach who's willing to sort of say what their limitations are and be that. I think you need that in D3 because the reality is for what you are trying to accomplish at that level, you're not going to have enough time, resources, people, all of that. And so it's going to be really important to use other resources and to sort of expand your network into what you can. And then I think when you're recruiting kids, to try to recruit athletes who want that, they want to seek that out individually and find it and be that. So I think sort of creating this supportive culture around this individual approach in some ways, at least when necessary, when something and so maybe for you, it's pitching is one of those cases where often it's necessary just from a work standpoint. And what I would say is the other athletes that we've had that haven't been pitchers, like I said, have been either underperforming, and the coach just didn't feel like they could support them in the way to get them up to where they were hurt, dealing with injuries, and didn't have maybe the support they needed. But that the coach didn't just send them to us. They also have been super supportive and receptive to allow that athlete to do what she needs to do to accomplish that. So I think it's that combination of things, which applies more extremely in D3 because of the time limitations, but applies across the board. We have D2 partners that leverage us very similarly. We don't have the money to bring on another staff member, but we need support and consulting and conversation around what our athletes should be doing. We, the summer, there's limitations. So the coaches that are willing to send kids and really support and encourage this culture of going to get better in the summer. So I think the underlying currents really apply in many scenarios, with the exception of our top partners that use us. They're just and also in addition to that, they have 42 people on staff and nutritionists and things like that. There's of course those examples, but most people, whether it's mid majors, it's D2, it's D3, they run into this where our game just doesn't give us enough resources. We have too many people on staff compared to our coaching ratio. We have limited time with what we could spend, yada, yada, yada. You could go on and on and on. So this combination of coaches who are willing to say, like, I'm not going to be able to support you in that way. So let's find ways to get you support.
Yeah.
And then who are willing to let the athlete do that and support it. And I think that's really the combination.
Side note too, I'd love them to just keep reflecting on like, is this the right rule for D3? I get it. It's supposed to be more of like a holistic, give them opportunities to be involved in other things. But at the end of the day, these are really elite level athletes who are trying to push themselves. So like, is it right that they're not allowed to work with their strength and conditioning professional, this person? I mean, I think there's also like, I'd like to see some of those rules get pushed a little bit.
And they have changed some, I will say. Maybe we come back next week since I'm like saying I don't know it. But they have increased it a little bit. So I know for sure that this year was a little more than it has been in the past, which I think I think most coaches found positive. I don't think anyone felt like negative about it and I can't remember the exact parameters, but there was a little more freedom for team stuff. And I think it was the hours. I think that's what it ultimately was, like the hours or the days maybe that they could, I can't remember, as days or hours that increased and you could use it how you wanted over the time period. So I think they have increased it a little bit, but yeah, I definitely agree for the same reasons that we've sort of allowed D1 athletes to have more time with not their coaches, so strength and conditioning professionals, nutritionists, things like that. Finding ways to support these athletes, both from a performance standpoint, of course, but also injury prevention, making sure they're doing what they need to stay healthy, for sure.
Yeah. The D3 athletes that we work with, I mean, I think they are involved. Most of them are like some other things as well. So, they've got other extracurriculars, something with an internship, et cetera, but most of them wish they had more time to train, so they're seeking it out in other ways, of course. But yeah, I think that needs to just like constantly be pushed and revisited for sure.
Yeah. All righty. Hopefully we gave Kris the answer she was looking for.
Yeah. If not, she'll text us all and be like, that didn't answer it. Yes.
She'll let us know.
You didn't answer XYZ.
Yeah.
Right. And correct our grammar.
We should have done a T-chart. That would have really made her happy to say, this is what it looks like. This is what it does not look like. So
she's like the origin, the point of origin for a T-chart.
Yes. She's the one that showed me the example. She uses it for like playing time. Like what would it look like for me to earn playing time? Like she uses it so that they are on the same page. So if they say like, if I had more energy in the dugout, and she's like, well, that's really not, that they can have really like direct conversations about it. So she uses it in lots of different, what does a good practice look like? That's how.
What does it not look like?
Yeah. That's how she uses it for her culture. And so, she taught me. And now, Kris, just so you know, it's a mainstay in the OGX team. So you've worked your way in. All right. Well, I think we touched on a lot, and I'm sure there will be other things that come up this week. I'm trying to think of the big series. I know you're going to say Texas A&M, Alabama, right? That's the So we're always following Texas A&M, but there's a couple good ones. Duke losing their mid-game week. They're like, which I think, it happens. You get to the top, you taste the top, and there's some pressure that comes along with that.
They'll be okay. They'll be okay.
Yeah. So, to touch on some of this next week. So until then.